The twin flames journey is, above all, a profound process of self-discovery and spiritual healing. Within this intense and transformative connection, the feminine plays a crucial role as a reflection of the masculine's essence. When faced with the depth of true love, the masculine often feels challenged, as this connection reveals their deepest wounds, hidden fears, and unconscious emotional patterns. The feminine, with her nurturing, intuitive, and receptive energy, not only reflects these issues, but also awakens a call for transformation, one that can be both painful and liberating. In this video, we will explore how this dynamic unfolds, why it triggers so many internal conflicts, and how, through this confrontation, the masculine can begin their journey toward integration and true union. The mirror of the soul. The role of the feminine in the inner journey of the masculine. In the twin flame connection, the feminine is not just a romantic partner. She is a reflection that reveals the truth of the masculine's essence. This truth is not always easy to face. When he looks into her eyes, he sees not only love and acceptance, but also everything that still needs to be healed within himself. Fears of rejection, insecurities, emotional rigidity, and the constant struggle between control and surrender. The presence of the feminine, when in balance, brings to the surface both the light and the shadows of the masculine. She awakens emotions in him that he often doesn't know how to deal with, such as vulnerability, the desire to belong, and the fear of not being enough. That's why it's common for the masculine, when confronted with this intensity, to seek distance or withdrawal. Not because there is no love, but because he still doesn't know how to deal with the truth the divine feminine reflects. The role of the feminine in this journey is not to save or fix the masculine, but rather to remain true to her essence. Firm, intuitive, compassionate. It is through her authenticity that she invites the others to find themselves. The feminine doesn't force awakening, but inspires it. She plants seeds that only blossom when his inner world is ready to receive them. By understanding this dynamic, the masculine begins to realize that the discomfort he feels is not the fault of the other, but a reflection of himself. It is at this moment that the true inner journey begins, when he understands that the feminine, with all her strength and gentleness, has merely revealed what has always been inside him, waiting for healing. The pain of the encounter. Why does the masculine pull away when confronted with true love? The meeting with the twin flame is something that shatters all the barriers of the ego. It's a love so deep and unconditional that it cannot be understood by the mind alone. It requires the surrender of the soul. For the masculine, accustomed to navigating the world through control, reason, and self-sufficiency, this kind of love presents a great challenge. He cannot dominate this connection, nor follow the conventional relational patterns he's learned throughout his life. Therefore, when true love manifests through the twin flame, typically expressed in the feminine pole, the masculine feels fear, but not fear of the love itself, but of what this love reveals. Old wounds, unresolved traumas, repressed needs, and the truth that he is still whole inside. The love of the twin flame requires authenticity and vulnerability, something the masculine has often learned to suppress from an early age. Thus, retreat becomes a defense mechanism. He pulls away, becomes silent, or even rejects this love, not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much. The intensity of the connection destabilizes him, forcing him to re-examine everything he believed about himself, relationships, and love. It's important to understand that this withdrawal is not an end, but part of the process. Many masculines need this space to dive into their own shadows, question old patterns, and begin, albeit unconsciously, a process of awakening. The feminine, in understanding this, can remain steady in her light, without trying to force, chase, or rescue, because it is in the masculine's time that healing takes place. True love, though initially painful, is also the gateway to inner liberation. When the masculine finally faces this pain, he begins to transform it into awareness, which is the first step toward one day returning to union with an open and awakened heart. Awakening through presence. The silent strength of the feminine in the transformation of the masculine. In a society that values action, speech, and constant movement, it's easy to underestimate the power of silent presence. However, on the twin flame journey, where everything is energy before it becomes physical, the true impact of the feminine lies not in her words, but in her vibration. The woman who has already begun her inner journey, who has gone through cycles of pain, healing, and rebirth, becomes a living channel of unconditional love. And it is this strong and vibrant presence that begins to activate something deep within the masculine. While the masculine lives immersed in his mental, social, and emotional structures, often hardened by fears of vulnerability, unresolved traumas, and distorted beliefs about masculinity, he finds in the awakened feminine an energy field that does not judge, does not try to change, does not demand this energy. It simply is. And it is in this silent acceptance that the process of inner deconstruction begins. This transformation does not happen in a visible or logical way. On the contrary, it is subtle. The masculine may even distance himself physically, resist contact, try to ignore, or dismiss the depth of the connection. But something within him has already been touched. The remembrance of who he truly is has been awakened. And no matter how much he denies it, an internal movement begins to develop. The unconscious search for coherence between what he feels and what he lives. The woman who holds this presence lives in harmony. She does not diminish herself waiting for the masculine, nor does she close herself off in resentment. She continues her own path of growth, staying aligned with her truth, her love, and her integrity. This is not passivity, it is spiritual wisdom. She understands that she cannot heal the other, but she can be a source of light that inspires them to heal. This type of presence is profoundly transformative because it operates on the soul level. The masculine, feeling seen in such a sincere and pure way, begins to question himself. He asks why he can't forget her. Why did she touch him so deeply? Why, even from afar, does her energy follow him? These questions are, in fact, invitations to awaken. The masculine's journey then ceases to be solely external, focused on power or control, and begins to turn inward through the energetic and spiritual influence of the feminine. He starts the movement of reconnecting with his essence. Sometimes this requires him to face pain he has always avoided. Other times he goes through losses, crises, or collapses that push him to dive deep within himself. But all of this is part of the process of rebirth. The feminine does not need to say anything to provoke this. She simply is. And this being, when in tune with the soul, is more powerful than any speech, any action, any attempt to convince. She awakens the masculine because she embodies love. And this love that neither binds nor demands is what finally teaches the masculine to set himself free. The return to the sacred. When the masculine recognizes the feminine as a part of himself, the masculine journey in the twin flame connection is marked by a deep cycle of confrontation, denial, silence, and ultimately, acceptance. In the beginning, when faced with the profound energy of the feminine, he attempts to resist. This resistance is not a sign of weakness, but rather a form of protection. The depth of true love forces him to confront parts of himself he spent his life avoiding. Insecurities, traumas, fears of abandonment, guilt, pride. Along the way, he may withdraw, project, rationalize, or even deny the value of this connection. But the energy that was awakened within him cannot be extinguished. Over time, the defenses the masculine has built begin to crumble, and nothing outside of himself seems to satisfy or fulfill him. Distractions, external achievements, superficial relationships lose their meaning. A deep unrest grows that can no longer be silenced. And so, he begins to return. Not necessarily to the divine feminine, but to what she has always mirrored for him, his lost essence. This return is painful yet sacred. He begins to realize that the feminine, whom he rejected, feared, or tried to control, is actually an extension of his soul, and not just any woman, but his own inner feminine, the intuition he's always ignored, the vulnerability he saw as weakness, the surrender he mistook for submission. All of this now returns as an essential part of who he is. When this recognition occurs, something shifts profoundly. The masculine begins to abandon his patterns of domination, emotional detachment, and control. He stops seeing life and relationships as battlegrounds and starts to understand them as spaces for healing, growth, and truth. He finally comprehends that being a man does not mean hardening oneself, but sustaining love, sustaining presence, sustaining the soul. The feminine, in turn, is no longer seen as a threat or an obstacle to overcome, but as a spiritual teacher, a sacred mirror, revealing what is most genuine within him. This perception completely transforms the way the masculine relates to women, to the world, and to himself. At this stage of the journey, union, whether physical or not, is no longer driven by need, scarcity, or fear. It is a recognition of completeness. The awakened masculine understands that the twin flame's love was not meant to fill him, but to expand him, and that true union is only possible when both masculine and feminine are aligned with their divine essence. This is the return to the sacred. When a man not only loves a woman but honors the feminine in all its forms, within and outside of himself. When he chooses to be present, conscious, and whole. When he understands that the separation was never between two bodies, but between two parts of the same soul, and that by integrating what he once feared, he is finally free not to escape, but to love with truth, presence, and purpose. At this point, the journey does not end. It simply transforms. Now, both walk not as halves in search of completeness, but as whole souls who have chosen to recognize, evolve, and serve the greater love, and this is sacred.